Hi guys, Matt Wroblewski here. I managed to make top 16 at St. Louis's Power of the Elements regional qualifier playing P.U.N.K Spright, as you can see here. The tournament went really well. I went 6-2, played against a lot of very difficult matchups, but overall it wasn't too bad. The deck never went to time, and I know myself for being a little bit slow, so that was a bit of an achievement. I can go through the matchups really quickly if you're interested. So I played round one Despia. It was basically a buy, decks that don't play an adequate number of hand traps versus this deck just instantly lose. If you're not on a deck that plays enough hand traps that you're going to consistently see 2 or more hand traps, I'm always going to be able to lock those decks out of the game. You need at least 2 hand traps to slow me down. So that matchup was pretty much a buy. Game 2, the only interesting part about it, he had like doubled TC Boo, but I was fortunate enough to have reboot, so I went reboot, and then went into like a Sky Cavalry play, and then went into Zeus and wiped his board, and then had another Zeus wipe with hand traps, and so that was pretty much game. He didn't have any follow-up. And then in round 2, I faced P.U.N.K Adventurer Therion. It was an interesting matchup, but he bricked game 1. He won the die roll and bricked, and so I just took my turn and set up basically an unbreakable board, and he couldn't out it. Game 2, I just hand trapped him to death, and again set up a strong board, and he couldn't play through it. That's pretty consistent for this deck. A lot of the times you're either going second, you're going to hand trap your opponent to death, and then you're either going to go for a Zeus play if they have big monsters on board, because you can't go into your regular elf and your totally awesome because they can just attack over those. So you go into Zeus. Otherwise, you can just go into those, go into the totally awesome play because it's basically a win condition. And can just negate your opponent's entire turn. Or you can try to OTK them, but, it can be difficult sometimes to not get locked into 2s and to manage to still get enough bodies on board to OTK. So that's kind of the options that we have going second. So yeah, the first 2 rounds, very, very easy. It was at that point that I began to realize like the strength of this deck compared to the decks that people saw as incredibly powerful last format. That this deck truly is like a notch above those decks in terms of power level. It's really, really crazy. It felt so easy playing this deck. Round 3 was actually a loss for me. I went 0-2 against ABC, Therion Adventurer. I contribute this to a couple of things, but I think the main thing is this guy was playing a higher hand trap count, which you have to have in order to have any sort of chance against this deck. It's so powerful. So he had an adequate number of hand traps, and then game 1 he double hand trapped me, and then I activated Prosperity for 6 to dig for E-Telly to be able to push through that. But it's kind of difficult to banish that many cards out of the extra deck because our extra deck is so tight. So I ended up banishing one of the 2 Gigantic. And then later as the game went on, I used one of the Gigantic. He interrupted it. And then I didn't have another Gigantic to get to Swap Frog, to get to Ronin, to get my, basically win condition of Totally Awesome on board. And so due to that, I pretty much lost that. If I had another Gigantic and didn't banish it, I would have been able to win that game. And then game 2, I drew poorly. He hand-trapped the crap out of me, went into a grind game, and he ended up getting the better of it. So sometimes it just goes that way. Round 4, we went against Tier Element. We won the dice roll for that one. Herald is a really, really nice floodgate. Feels a lot better than Desert Locust, which is actually an enabler for Tier Element. It allows them to discard and then trigger their effects. So you don't want to do that, whereas Herald is actually a floodgate for them. So Herald felt really, really good going first into that matchup, and is actually why I chose Herald. And then game 2, we got into a grind game. I hand trapped him quite a bit, and we started grinding. And it got to a point where I could push for game, but I probably shouldn't, but I did anyways. And he had like a card set and 2 in hand, and I tried to go for like a unicorn access code talker play, squandering many of my resources, and that pretty much spelled disaster, and I lost because of that. And then game 3, I won handily. I flipped amp dice. I went full combo, more or less, and then had anti-spell, flipped in draw phase, and the rest is history. He said the anti-spell made it to where it was impossible for him to come back. He said he might have been able to fight through my board otherwise, so anti-spell definitely pretty strong. Round 5, I went against Pure Spright. He won the dice roll, but Nib Gamma is kind of broken. And then game 2, I managed to slow him down with hand traps. He passed. I did a Zeom in play, but I didn't have any darks engraved to summon Chaos Ruler back in order to go into Baron and to push. So I committed my blue to the board. That way I could like link off blue, go into Elf, and then with blue engrave, I can summon back Chaos Ruler and then go into Baron using Gamma. But when I committed all of that to the board, I got nibbed. So kind of played into that, kind of was hoping he would have sided that out, but certainly a strong card versus me. It makes sense that he would have kept it in. And then game 3, I led with E-Telly. And it's kind of the reason I play E-Telly is in my opinion, it's a better cross out. People are too scared to hand trap E-Telly because of Gamma. And that means that you at least get a body on board. And so if they Veiler or Imperm Zeomin or Ash, Foxy or something, you still get a body, you still get a tuner, you're still making your health plays, you're still doing a lot with that, and it's really, really good. So I, in game 2, game 3, went E-Telly, led with that. It baited out a hand trap or 2, which is basically the purpose of playing that, and then went into my Spright plays, and was able to get to Elf Toad with some other interruptions, and he couldn't come back from it. Round 6, I played against Spright yet again, but this time it was actually the mirror P.U.N.K Spright. He won the dice roll, but I hand trapped him to oblivion in the first game, and then set up a board that he couldn't play through. In game 2, trying to remember. Yeah, I think I just didn't draw an adequate number of hand traps, and he was able to set up a big board, and I couldn't play through it. And then game 3, I went full combo pass. He grinned and played Dark Ruler no more, and then in that match, we got deck checked, so we were like, going 20 minutes later than everyone. So we had everyone. We were like at table 6 or something. Everyone was surrounding us, watching us play, and everyone flipped their shit when he went Dark Ruler. I had this huge board, and it, looked like really menacing. He was about to completely destroy me, and then of course I had Judgment set, and that pretty much ended. He was so mad. He was fuming after that with Judgment. Judgment's so powerful. I really, really love that card over a Pointer because, yeah, a Pointer does hit Raw in Sphere mode, but it's a really, really bad card in situations where you either get stopped during your combo turn, or you brick, or you go into a grind game and you top deck that card. Pointer is bad in all those situations, and Judgment is insane in all of those situations. And that's why I prefer it, especially at this point in time where I didn't expect to play a whole bunch of tier element. I think it made more sense, and I really enjoyed playing Judgment. So round 7 was tier, and it was my only other loss. I went 0-2. I went first. I won the die roll, but he had the tier hand trap and milled 3 and got like Miru plus King of the Swamp, which like allowed him to eventually get into Kit and Kaleido on my turn. And it's really, really rough as a Spright player to be dealing with those monsters because, we need like Zeus or Cavalry to out those monsters, but we don't have the battle phase, so we can't. And of course, Access Code Talker is just like out of the question. It's such a bad play going first. And plus, you don't want to pop those monsters. And so, what are we going to do? If we make our normal plays, they just go to battle phase and attack over it. So basically that game was over before it started. And then game 2, I think I played into Super Poly with the new fusion, and he was able to fuse off like Red and Elf and then attack over, one of my boss monsters, and pretty much gamed me there. I kind of you know, lost to myself on that one, but it is what it is. You live and you learn. And last but not least was P.U.N.K, which is very, very strong. Game 1 was super interesting. He won the dice roll, but I waited for him to commit his entire hand and then went nib, and he chained Baron, and then, of course, I chained Gamma, which is so strong. Having nib and then, you know, just about 12 other hand traps to interact with negations just makes it to where you can completely annihilate your opponent's board. I mean, nib was definitely the MVP hand trap of the tournament for me. But yeah, so so I was able to nib him, but then my hand, I had very little gas. So I wasn't able to do a lot. I went into a gigantic, and then he ogred it. I passed, and he kind of took control of the game from there, clearing a lot of my board, but he left my nib on board, and he put an ogre dance at 3,100 because the Yaman increased it by 600. So just enough where my nib couldn't attack over it, and on his turn, you know, with his field spell, he could get a lot of advantage, and he would beat me ultimately. But, you know, he was only at 2,000 life points, and he also had like a level 3 punk set, or in defense position as well. So I was able to summon a level 2, I think it was Swap Frog, enter battle. I attacked over the level 3 punk in defense position with my Swap Frog, and then declared an attack on his ogre with nib, which has a higher attack than my nib. But then in response to the declaration, I went Smashers, banishing Frog, and banishing his ogre dance, and then, you know, I get a replay and then attacked him directly with nib. He was only at 2,000, so that was game. So barely managed to get that one. And then game 2, he made a big board, and I didn't draw adequate hand traps. You know how that goes. And then game 3, he only hand trapped me once, or maybe twice actually, but I was still able to get to Elf plus Toad, Imperm, and I think some other interruptions. And it was enough to stun his turn, and then he passed back, and there was like only 2 minutes on the clock, and I could just basically go to battle phase, attack him, and then just combo for 2 minutes, and he just shook my hand. So good game. So that was pretty much the entire thing. All in all, I went 6-2. Definitely the MVPs of the deck. Of the main deck would be Spright, Starter, and E-Telly. Easily the best cards in the deck. Totally broken. And Prosperity is really insane too, because it basically digs to those cards. If you get stopped, you can just, banish 6 and try to get to one of those cards. And if you don't get stopped, you can just hold your Prosperity to the end of your turn and then just banish 3 and try to find a hand trap to give you some different axes to play on, so you can play through Dark Ruler No More and stuff like that. And then the best hand trap, like I said before, was definitely Nibiru. And then the extra deck, Toad and Elf, definitely the MVPs. Again, Toad is its own win condition, and Elf enables that. And Elf sets up lots of other plays and allows you to get lots of advantage. Elf's totally insane. And then the best hand trap, already said that. And then side deck MVPs were Judgment and Dark Ruler No More. So yeah, Judgment going first. That card's just insane in so many situations. I think the versatility of it is what makes it so good. And then and the fact that you don't really go to time with this deck because it's so powerful makes it to where it's not a downside that you pay half your life points. And then Dark Ruler No More is just insane. The fact that it doesn't take any card economy besides itself, and it negates the entire board. Really, really powerful versus everything. The older decks, the previous format decks from Nats and everything, and then the decks now, it's insane against both. So I'll very quickly go over the deck. Here we're playing triple Starter, triple E-Telly, triple Prosperity, absolute staples. These cards are so broken, it's ridiculous. And the synergy that these cards have with not just the Punk package, but also with Gamma, allowing you to grab an extender, allowing you to, have an enabler for blue, allowing you to push for game and battle phase. That's true for both of these. Just so powerful. And then having a card that says, look at the top 6 cards and pick any. I don't know how many of you guys play Magic the Gathering, but if there was a card that did that in Magic the Gathering, it would be worth the same amount of money that, that Black Lotus is worth. That's just absolutely broken. And then going with, the triple starter, we have triple blue. What breaks starter is blue, because you can, of course, search jet, and that gets you to smashers or a starter, depending on what's going on. If you open jet, you can go jet into starter if you want, if you feel like you need potentially more bodies to play through hand traps. Like, say you have toad plus jet, you go toad, jet. Rather than adding smashers, it's best to add starter, and then that allows you, say you consolidate. I wouldn't consolidate there into gigantic. You probably want to consolidate into elf, because then if elf gets interrupted, you don't have swap frog underneath gigantic, so you could still banish swap to summon back Ronin, and you'd still have combo. But yeah, in any case, you can search this instead of smashers, and it'll give you combo. And then if your opponent doesn't interrupt you, can set it and then summon red on your opponent's turn once you realize that they don't have Dark Ruler no more. That's really, really good to do too. That's always something you want to be thinking about. And then, so these cards synergize with starter, and then of course we have a small punk package, one Deer Note, one Foxy, and one Xiamen. Super, super powerful. It's all you need. You could do the same thing with the Spright package and just play one of each of these. I know that sounds crazy, but if you want to do more like a Scythe Lock type of build, honestly, that would be really good. You could fit Adventurer in here. I think there's some pro players that are working on builds like that. But I like this build for what it was. Swap Frog and Ronin. We don't play any other frogs. There's no need to. We're just trying to combo. We're going into Baron. We're trying to completely stop our opponent's turn. We don't care as much about them attacking over our stuff. So really, we just want to get the win condition of totally awesome, and this package suffices. It's perfect. This right here allows you to get to totally awesome turn 1, and this allows you to have another body that you can summon off of totally awesome, which then you can tag out Hulk into Formula, and this plus Formula gets you into Herald, and Herald is, well, it's Herald. It's an Omni Negate, and it's a Floodgate, and it's super, super strong. So that's all of that. This card's really cool too, because if you end up with extra Spright bodies that you don't need, you can get the effect to add, like Jet effect, add Smashers, swap, add it back to hand, and have follow-up for next turn, which is really, really nice. So you have that. Called by, just as a one-of, it's just such a good card offensively and defensively. There's no reason not to play it. Like I said previously, I prefer playing E-Telly to Crossout because I think it's just a better Crossout, but Call By is always nuts, so I think it definitely deserves a spot as a one-of. And then for the hand traps, we play Triple Gamma and, of course, Driver. This is basically an engine requirement in combination with E-Telly. You have to play this because you summon this off of E-Telly to get some of your plays going sometimes. And you summon this off of Hulk in order to summon back Chaos Ruler to get into Baron. So this card's really, really important. And it's also just a really insane hand trap going second. Not so much going first. We don't have enough bait. If you have a lot of bait without committing a monster, then obviously this card's insane. We don't have a ton of bait, and everyone that I played with was smart enough not to allow me to bait them into it. I tried my darnest, but nobody wants to ash my prosperities for some reason. And then, of course, triple ash, just generic, really, really good. Imperm, best targeted negation. Only 2 effect failure. It's probably the most mid hand trap out of all of them. And then triple nib, the all-star. I love this card. I felt like, yeah, if people start playing just really pure versions of Spright and play, tier, and they play it very, very tight and don't overextend or anything, then yeah, for sure. But that's not how people are playing right now. For one, we still have all the old decks from the previous format that all get blown out by nib, especially if you pair it with another hand trap. So it's already pretty damn decent. And then you have everyone, myself included, playing these super greedy versions because that's just how we like to play here in America. We play super greedy and we play into everything. But I think there's some logic to how this build is. Again, you know, E-Telly baits out hand traps and then allows you to make your Spright plays. That's pretty much how it goes. That's what this build is premised on. And if they don't hand trap you, then you just lock them out. Like your board's just way too much for them to handle. And Nibiru is just super insane because against, you know, my deck, for instance, if you pair Nib with one of these hand traps, that's a blowout for me. That's a blowout for any deck. So all the decks that I played all day long, you know, this was just so strong against. And I had numerous people say, if you just didn't have Nib, I would have had it. Only 2 effect Veiler. Again, it's the most mid one. Everyone activates all of their quick play E-Tellies and special summons in the draw phase, whether it's branded opening or whether it's Spright starter. It doesn't matter. People are pretty good at playing around this, and this also plays into everything. It's like basically has, you know, in the subtext, please triple tactics talents me. So, you know, it is good. It's a good card to, it's one of the best cards that you can add off of Chaos Ruler, which is why it's really good. But again, it's probably the most mid card, and I wanted to keep it a flat 40. So I didn't want to play 41 with Veiler. I didn't think it was necessary. And I'm really glad I kept it where I did. I think the deck doesn't have issues with consistency, but simply by having 15 hand traps, you know, sometimes you just draw too many of them. And so I think keeping it at a flat 40 really worked for me. And I was really happy with the build. I can talk more about changes overall once I get to that point. I'll go quickly over this. Totally awesome. Double gigantic. Double elf. 1 Hulk. 1 formula. 1 herald. We can talk about this very quickly. I decided to play this because it just seemed better than playing the Locust. Omega version. The reason being that you get to deck thing your entire deck, and then you pass turn, and then you Hulk and draw a card, and so you get to draw either a hand trap or you either get to draw a combo, basically. So that's really nice. And then Herald, you get to choose what you want to negate. So, you know, you get to use your own expert opinion and understanding of where to interrupt their combo to make it as impactful as possible. Plus, it's a floodgate. You compare that to Locust, they discard, they get to choose a discard that could be advantageous for them against Tyr. That's literally an enabler that allows them to combo. And then you banish a random card and it comes back. So yeah, it just made sense to play this. Like, I get that we play a lot of small creatures, so it's kind of tempting to go into Omega because it puts more OTK potential, but I'm really glad I had this, especially the Tier Element matchup that I had that was like, what, round 4? Yeah, if it wasn't for having Herald, it probably would have been a completely different story. If I went and tried going to Locust and then allowed him to discard one of his tiers, it probably would have crushed me. Chaos Ruler, Baron. These cards are super broken. And as long as Konami allows us to play with Hulk in Chaos Ruler and do these broken Baron plays and then go, you know, tag out into synchros that are tuners and can sync on the opponent's turn, you know, you might as well do that. It's so broken, and I don't think you're going to be able to do this for too much longer. I think Konami's going to finally correct that. Access Code Talker, Unicorn, really good. I mean, Unicorn just comes up where you just want to answer something, like against Tier, you know, you don't want to pop their guy, so spinning them back and then pushing for game is really good. There's just situations where you wouldn't be able to close out the game and you'd have to grind if you didn't have this. It makes it very easy for you to win in short order. And, you know, I contribute this to not having to go to time all that much. And then last but not least, the Zeus package plus Sky Cavalry. I think this card's really needed. I think there's situations because our XYZs are kind of small. If our opponent has big monsters in their attack position, it's just like super awkward. you know, you're like, I could just Zeus your whole board, but the issue is if I go into any XYZs like gigantic and attack into it, it just dies, and I'm not getting to a Zeus. But this solves that issue while simultaneously giving you a way to return stuff to hand, so to answer big boss monsters in a way that doesn't destroy it. So that's super helpful. Definitely use this to go into Zeus today. It's good. It's probably out of the entire deck, this comes up the least, but it's pretty good. So I liked the extra deck. I think the only thing that you could think about here, I think it's pretty standard. For the build that I went with, I think this is the way to play it. But I think probably better if you're going to play the punk stuff is to Scythe Lock. So you could change up a lot here. Again, like I was saying before, you could just literally cut down to just having... It sounds crazy, but I swear, test it. It's crazy enough to work. One gigantic, one elf, and just keeping it very tight, and having Dagda, you know, having a way to pop it, Wonder Magician or something like that, with Baron, so you could potentially do it in standby phase, and then pair it with Herald, so they can't droplet you. And then just have a very small Spright engine coupled with the adventure stuff and maybe some Plague Spreaders, because Plague Spreader is like an insane starter itself. So that's an idea. I think that's probably a better win condition, but you know, this definitely got me there more often than not. But I think against Tier, as Tier becomes more popular, we're going to have a stronger shift to having a stronger win condition, because that deck is insane. It just goes. So you just need something that's like complete floodgate, and I think Scythe Locking them would be really good. So on to the side, Triple Judgment, really big all-star. Stopped me from getting Dark Rulered. It when I got stopped on my turn, and I had to just like set and pass. Like, this card's so impactful. It allows you to like turn skip your opponent or slow them down, and then on your turn you can try to top deck to get back into the game. Anti-spell is really good too. You know, I mean, if you're able to full combo and then go into this, that's just game. You know, it's not as good if your opponent is able to stop you, but it's still very powerful. So we have those, and then I had Duster and Triple Lightning Storm. Didn't side these once, didn't see any back row decks, which I'm totally fine with. I don't like thinking that much. Back row decks are the hardest decks to play against. But playing against, you know, mostly meta, you know, I was very prepared for that. I knew my lines. I think it's probably correct to play this stuff. This is good versus other decks like Despia. Oh, I probably did side this. I'm sure I did side this in going second versus Despia. Or if you go against Sword Soul or something, it's good too. But yeah, didn't see any spell and trap decks. Triple Dark Ruler no more. The MVP for going second. The card's so powerful. The card economy of just requiring one card to completely out your entire opponent's board, just degenerate. And again, this deck doesn't really go to time because it's so powerful. So it really didn't come up that you can't deal damage to your opponent. Really, really good. And then to round it out, we have Red Reboot. This card's insane. It's a god card. Kind of unfair, but you know, you feel like so safe when you draw this. I lost to Deck Devastation Virus in one of my games. Oh, versus yeah, I forgot to mention it. Versus my last round, round 8. Against P.U.N.K, they hit me with Deck Devastation Virus, and that was game. But yeah, having this card to stop that sort of degeneracy is really, really good. Then they had these two. Never sided in Resonator. In theory, it's really good. It's a win condition in time, and it's really like the best win condition in time, because you can actually normal summon it and then summon something like a Swap Frog or something. It's like kind of crazy, or like a hand trap or something, because it literally just says when this card is normal summon, you can special zone 1 level 4 or lower monster from your hand, and then the other effect allows you to gain life points depending on I think the attack, yeah, of gain life points equals to the attack of one of your face-up monsters. So yeah, it's like a really, really good like a very playable win condition in time. Never came up though, never went to time, which I'm thankful for. I don't know, maybe you could cut that, but I like having win conditions in time, at least one, just because time rules is kind of difficult in Yu-Gi-Oh! 40 minutes usually isn't enough, but I guess with this deck it's more than enough. And last but not least, I just side in 1 carrot. I'm not on carrot. Usually don't need it. You know, the deck just locks people out of the game, and then on my turn I win. I don't need, usually can't search carrot and red. Half the time I can't even search red. So just 1 carrot for, you know, back row matchups and stuff versus Despia because it doesn't negate the activation, negates the effects, so that's really good. Yeah, it's all good stuff. That's the deck. Again, I think you could play